scale greenhouse gas emissions from society, and it's not from a few evil oil and gas and coal companies. It's across all of society with how we move around, how we heat or cool our homes, all of industry, all of agriculture, everything that we do to move around or as we eat is associated with greenhouse gas emissions, and those have just accumulated in the atmosphere, and they're driving this warming that is global in scale, and that's causing this global scale glacier retreat.
At the Columbia Ice Field, the most famous glacier that a lot of you probably know is the Athabasca Glacier. And so just to give you guys all an idea of how quickly these glaciers are all shrinking, the foot of the glacier was here in 1992. If you keep going backwards, all the way over here on a terminal moraine. And I know it's kind of hard to see where the edge of the glacier is because of all of the snow, but if you keep going, the glacier is way, way, way over there now. And you have to keep in mind that it's not just this distance, it's also the depth. So the ice would have been many meters over our heads over there.
We put in the glacier dynamics, how the glaciers move, and this kind of climate scenario and the climate downscaling to get the, if it warms by 2 degrees or 3 degrees, what does that actually mean? These glaciers are already so out of balance. Like they're retreating, the snow line's way too high, so they're way out of equilibrium. So even if we stabilize now, 2/3 of this ice goes away. But if we continue to warm, as is expected, then we'll lose, as you've said, 80 to 90% of the ice. The way we can reverse this is through that large scale, climate action, decarbonization of society.
Changing the planet significantly in terms of removing ice from places where it's been a persistent feature of the landscape for 10, 20,000 years or even longer in some cases. And obviously when we do that, we're exposing new land at the surface that'll be colonized by plants, it'll be weathered by the various geological processes that do that. And the nature of the landscape will change quite significantly. And because you have weathering going on, you're producing both particulate and dissolved products of that. And those become fluxes of particles and chemicals, which go into lakes, rivers, the ocean, ultimately. It's sad from my perspective that, the thing you spent your life studying is gradually disappearing from large
communities that are directly tied somehow to the health of glaciers. For example, in some parts of the world, certain communities rely, in terms of drinking water, on glaciers and their health. Of course, on a much grander scale, sea level rise and implications there impact a great number of people, and again, most directly with low-lying communities, some of whom are already seeing waters rise and being displaced by sea level rise, which some people don't even realize.
And even at the low end of projected sea level rise, it's going to be pretty hard, I think, for the world to deal with. It's hard to find an upside of rising sea levels. Glaciers are kind of doing this on human timescales. They're disappearing in your lifetime. In my lifetime, we're already losing glaciers from the world, and as this century goes on, we're going to lose thousands and thousands of glaciers. When you look at the global picture from satellites, it's everywhere. What's happening right now, and it's maybe more rapid than anyone originally anticipated.
We're losing the reservoir of glacier ice. We're losing the information that's contained in that reservoir about past conditions. And we're not being very effective at controlling that. And ultimately that means the loss of a potential source of water for all of the rivers that drain out of there. And of course, that's really the kind of drainage hub of North America, because we have rivers in that region which drain to the Mississippi, which drain to the Atlantic, which drain to the Pacific, and which drain to the Arctic Ocean, all going off from that region. So it's potentially a continental scale impact on water resources.
Glaciers right now hold back some water. for July, August, September when we really need it for 8 irrigation districts in southern Alberta. And when the glaciers are gone, they'll no longer, give us that hydrological service. So we might have to be, capturing some of the spring rains and the snow melt and holding it back so that we can still have that source in August and September.
Environmental contaminants that humans produce that we use in our daily use that actually can get up onto ice caps and glaciers.
But then if we move into a warmer period of time, then ice is removed by the melting and a lot of these things come back into circulation. So we're now dealing again with pollutants that we thought we'd got rid of in the 1960s coming back into the environment. They're turning up in various sorts of organisms and potentially in the human food chain. By and large, we seem to be pretty oblivious to the fact that that's actually happening and that there might be some issues associated with it. So these things get banned and immediately someone has a bright idea, well, we'll build something else that will replace what was just banned. And I guess we'll get 2 or 3 years of use out of that before that gets banned, and then we'll do the same thing again. So we can see that that's being recorded now by the deposition of these substances in the glaciers. Isn't enough policing going on to know what's happening or to actually deter the people who are producing this stuff from doing it.
I started grad school to start doing what I do in 2006. So basically since then, when no one was talking about Antarctica, the Arctic, what's going on, I have seen in general, basically since then, when I got interested in doing what I do now, just a huge shift in awareness and discussion. I would say mostly awareness in the general population about what's going on in places very far from where we are, mostly. And to me, that might actually be the biggest shift, this shift in awareness, which is really thanks, I think, in huge part to younger generations holding older generations accountable and taking a stand finally for the planet, really. It wasn't like that when I became interested in becoming an ice core scientist, and it really is now.
For the knowledge that we've gained from looking at these systems recently, and think about how and where and when they might prove to be useful in terms of helping to chart a way forward to deal with, a planet with a much larger population than we have at the moment. I think it's hard to believe that there isn't going to be a crisis 20, 30 years down the road where these things really come home to roost. And we're going to need to have thought about what we're going to do. And that we really need to be looking at alternative ways of doing things. And I think we're quite capable of doing that. We need the framework within it which it can be done, and that unfortunately is dependent on politicians.
We are very connected to the health of glaciers, and I mean, here in Edmonton, that's not hard to see. You can drive just a couple hours and see the Columbia ice field, and that's where our water comes from. That's where all of our water comes from. So in some ways here, it's not so hard to see, but that sort of direct connection and understanding how we really are globally connected and connected to our environment, I think is really important.
Love that people can connect to them and get to go visit a glacier while you can and see like the power of glaciers and their how incredible they are as part of the landscape, and then to see that also and understand that they're receding from the landscape. When you actually see here's what's happening in nature, far from some urban heat island effect or something like that. Here's like some pristine environment that's being radically modified from human activity. I think that's humbling and starts to build some respect and responsibility. And so I guess I love if people will connect to the glaciers and to the environment, to build in that I guess empathy for it and to the understanding that we're stewards of this and we're not necessarily doing our jobs right now to preserve these environments for future generations. So I hope people can get out the mountains, see glaciers while they can, and realize how special they are.